Hello and welcome back. There's been a lot going on in the crypto market as per usual, so let's jump right in and catch up on everything that's been going on. All right, so starting out is the Trusty Crypto Fear and Greed Index. As you can see, today we are up in the neutral territory, a substantial bounce from yesterday where we were in fear. Now we are back in neutral. A lot of this is due to the rapid increase in price that we've seen in Bitcoin over the past 24 hours, as well as an overall increased level of confidence in the wider market. I think a lot of uncertainty of the global fears has subsided, at least for now. And so this is why we're starting to see a resurgence in the crypto market. If we go over to crypto bubbles, we can see overall it's a relatively mixed day in the market. We've got a couple pretty big gainers here. We have a couple losers, I guess, but nothing too crazy. Overall, it's just a relatively mixed day. One thing I wanted to mention before getting into the next part of the video is if you find this information useful, please drop a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and it helps me provide more content for all of you. Moving over to the Bitcoin chart, we can see this is the course of about the past year that we have on the timeline here. We can see that essentially ever since late March when we hit our previous, or I guess our new all-time highs, we've had this downward channel going on here. And so it's been consistent, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows. It's currently up for discussion what this is, whether it's the start of a downtrend in the market or if this is a bull flag. If this were to be a bull flag, we would see that this downtrend would essentially have this channel going on right here. In order for us to have continued highs, we would need to break out of this channel, which at this current point in time is somewhere around $69,000. In order for a continued move up, we need to see some breakout sustained above this level. So this is something that we're keeping an eye on. As we can see, it looked like this channel may have been broken, but we've seen essentially the wicks come back up into this channel. So I wouldn't necessarily say this is a break of the channel so far. However, as you can see multiple times, we have definitely tested the lows in this channel. We'll have to see where this goes over the next several months. I wanted to talk about kind of the 4-year cycle. Is it broken? There's been some speculation that, because we hit all-time highs before the halving, there's been this sense of speculation that, maybe this was the top and it's just going to be coming down from here. And we're not going to be seeing new highs until potentially after next halving, which would come in 2028. We're going to talk about, if there's merit to this argument. We'll look at some data as well to go over, whether some of these arguments are merited. And then hopefully this will give you some extra information and context to make your own decision on where you think the market is going to move. Going on, I wanted to talk about the Bitcoin halving spiral. I'm not sure if you guys have seen this before, but essentially what this does is this maps the price of Bitcoin as of a period in time related to the halving. And the halving essentially is the circle, right? So we can see over time as we get through, this is where, Bitcoin started, and then we moved around and around, got to the halving. And then we also, essentially have seen the price coming through. So here was the first halving. We go through. This is about a quarter of the way through the halving, half, 3/4, all the way. I mean, you can see how it goes out from here. So obviously we just hit the most recent halving right here. And then we're kind of moving along the spiral. As you might see in the past, these lines have never crossed. So if this were to continue, obviously we would need to see the price of Bitcoin continue to go up. If we're looking kind of where we are at the current point in the halving cycle, we're, just shy of halfway through, this first quarter. So about, we're about 1/8 of the way through the halving cycle, a little bit less than that. We can see comparing to the previous halving cycles, this one is similar to where we were in terms of, this line. Again, these lines are logarithmic. So this is not like an algorithmic change. This would be like an exponential change. So this is something where we could see, we were a little bit below this first line on the first halving, or I guess the second halving cycle. And then on the third halving cycle, we could see we were a bit above this line. And now you can see we're sitting a little bit below this line. So, potentially we're following a path similar to maybe what the second halving cycle was, or maybe, as price continues to increase, obviously more money is needed to move these prices as dramatically as they have in the past. So we could potentially see this start to slow down. But at least as of so far, we haven't seen this pattern break. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of where we go, over the next, several months, years, so we can see, kind of how this continues to fare. The other thing I wanted to talk about is going into Bitcoin price temperature. This is also to help, I guess, address some of the concerns that maybe we've already seen, the highs for this cycle, which ironically came before the halving. But we can talk more about if this is merited and things like that. So the Bitcoin price temperature is interesting. As we can see here, it's a measure of distance between the current Bitcoin price and its 4-year moving average. Essentially, what this does is it maps massive spikes in the price of Bitcoin, at least compared to where it's been in the past, right? So what we can see here is, the 2017 bull run. Obviously, prices, the temperature got really hot because prices moved upwards very aggressively. Same thing again in 2021. There's some spikes here. As we can see on these local high, or these previous all-time highs that we had in about March, the Bitcoin price started to move up a little bit, but we never got to see any of the major spikes that we saw in the past. I mean, granted, nobody knows what's going to happen in the future. This is not financial advice. I know just as little as you do when it comes to predicting the future. All I can do is go off the data that we've seen in the past, and then we can maybe intuit whether this would be relevant for the future or not. But what this is personally looking like to me, we see a mini spike here, 2016, see a mini spike here, 2019. We're seeing a mini spike here in 2024. What we're seeing here is, obviously there's about 3 years between this one and about 5 years between this one. But what we can see is this always leads into a little bit of a pullback, and then we go into the major price spikes. Same thing here, a little bit of a pullback, even in this case, quite a substantial pullback, and then we go into the price spike. If this is to follow something of a similar schedule, we might see continued pullback into price spikes. Depending on how this would look, based on the past, we might be seeing anywhere from about a year from the mini spike to the next highest spike. It was about 18 months from the mini spike to the big spike. So if this were to follow the same type of pattern, this would say anywhere between essentially March and September of 2025 is when we would be expecting this large price spike. A lot of what I've seen is we'd expect to see a spike in Bitcoin kind of late this year, early next year, and then the alt run would start and continue into late 2025, potentially early 2026, depending on kind of how long that lasts. But at least this chart seems to line up somewhat accurately with that time frame. The next chart I wanted to look at is the 180-day realized price change. This chart is a little bit interesting. It shows maybe some more mixed data that doesn't as clearly indicate some of the things we've already seen, but that's why I wanted to bring it up to you guys, just so I'm not trying to be here and cherry pick data that only confirms one bias, which ultimately is that Bitcoin's going to go up, right? I think maybe you can intuit that this would indicate Bitcoin's price going up, but I don't think that's necessarily for certain the case. So one thing that we can see, this chart is the 180-day realized price change. So essentially what that means is the realized price is effectively, it takes all of the previous transaction history and then adds all that price together. So, and what this does is it allows you to get a good sense of kind of where the market is at. So as we can see right now, the realized price of Bitcoin, it's estimated to be about $31,000. And the price here is close to 60,000. So what we can see is the market average is up about 2x on Bitcoin, which is, decent. As we can see more larger spikes, this gets up to about 4x, 5x in some cases. And then if we see at some of the lows, the market is actually, on average negative on their Bitcoin holdings. As we can see in the past, these large parabolic runs do actually produce some pretty incredible spikes that we've seen. Over time, they've obviously gotten lower as the price has gone up, because it's obviously harder for a $60,000 Bitcoin to 10x than it would be for a $600 Bitcoin to 10x. What we can see, again, if we're looking at the 4-year cycle, we can see right here, we're sitting, again, comfortably above the realized price, but again, price is moving sideways as well as realized price, it's coming up a little bit, but it hasn't really spiked. So if we're to look at this in the past in the 4-year cycle, or I guess, as close to the 4-year cycle as we can draw, we might be able to see something kind of similar here. And what this shows is, again, the realized price is rising slowly. The price of Bitcoin is sitting about 2x above realized price. And, it's nothing, the realized change, again, is, in the 30-ish% at the peak. Here we can see is about 40-ish%. What we see after that is the price then kind of stagnates, possibly even kind of trends down for a little bit. We have some event. In this case, there's like a kind of a final capitulation, and then it starts its run up. And then again, this is where you see both realized price go up dramatically as along with price. Part of the reason for this realized price, I guess, is two things. First, obviously, you have the price going up very dramatically. So every purchase that is made impacts realized price a lot more than when it's going level. The other thing, though, is I think this could be an indicator of new entrants into the market and potentially, essentially, retail getting involved, right? When retail is getting involved, they have no cost basis. They're, potentially this is their first ever purchase of Bitcoin. And so ultimately, this raises the overall price value very dramatically because, you may have some whale who's been in since, couple $100 now selling at $57,000 at this point. And then obviously somebody that had a cost basis at 0 is now 57,000. So this can increase the realized price very dramatically pretty quickly. So what we're going to see here is, nothing like that has really happened yet, which is why I'm thinking it's kind of like this area. But again, we are seeing some quite a bit of gap. This gets to almost 3x at this point. We're seeing quite a bit of gap between the realized price and the price, which means to me that, potentially we could have seen the highs already, or it doesn't look too different from like maybe what we're seeing here. So it could indicate that, maybe this was just a weaker, bull run than we've seen in the past. One thing that I think is worth mentioning is we should always consider the fact that we always refer to Bitcoin as being on a 4-year cycle. And something that maybe we'll look into in a future video is the fact that maybe it's not a 4-year cycle per se in line with the halving, but maybe it's a cycle that lines up with the Federal Reserve and what they end up doing, because that also, I think, can just as heavily impact the price of crypto, just as much as, this 4-year halving cycle and the rising of the hash rate and the increasing of scarcity and, new Bitcoins and things like that. I do think that definitely does, have an impact. Bitcoin ultimately, at this point at least, is considered a risky asset. And so when it's a risky asset, risky assets are definitely impacted quite dramatically by, the Federal Reserve monetary policy. If their monetary policy gets more strict and money becomes more expensive, that usually impacts risk assets. And if it becomes cheaper, then it usually impacts risk assets, but in a more positive way, because people are willing to spend their money more freely because they need to find alternative places that provide a safe return instead of the federal government, which, if interest rates are high, then you can essentially sit around and do nothing and collect your 5.5%, from the government as it stands. So anyway, if you found any of this information helpful, please go ahead, like and subscribe. Also, feel free to leave me a comment if there's anything that you'd like to see more of, or maybe you'd like to see changed. Just let me know. Ultimately, I am here to help provide more information for you all and bring you hopefully helpful commentary to give you a better understanding on the market, as well as help you make a more informed decision. Again, none of this is financial, tax, legal, any of that sort of advice. You should not be making investments based on, the opinions of myself. You need to go out, make your own opinions, and then from there, you can hopefully make an informed decision. Anyway, thank you for tuning into the channel, and we'll see you in the next video.